Now, here's the thing. Nebuchadnezzar, for a long time, people didn't know if they really, historians didn't know. Well, we don't really know. We know the Bible says that. And still they started uncovering, as they would dig, archaeological finds. And here's one of them that they found. And the writings said, "Say Babylon, the city which is the delight of my eyes, which I have glorified, may it last forever." Why was that statement made? Well, the reason why is because Nebuchadnezzar is like every one of us. He did not want to admit he was eventually going to die. He wanted to live. He wanted his kingdom to go on. And he wanted to refuse that. And that's one of the reasons why when you get to the next chapter, you find that Nebuchadnezzar builds the whole statue out of all gold. And that statue happens to be with an element of 666 in it. It was 60 cubits high. It was 6 cubits wide, and they played 6 musical instruments around it. Now, you've read 666 somewhere else, and the Bible says that Nebuchadnezzar said, if you don't bow down to this image, you will die. Read Revelation, where the Antichrist system, based on a 666, is also saying if you don't bow down to their image, you're going to die. What's working in Nebuchadnezzar's heart is the same thing that's working through the hearts of the Antichrist from that point on. It has always been this same thing. Because the enemy, he doesn't know, Lucifer doesn't know when Jesus is coming. He's always got to have a man on the back burner. But here's the deal, folks. What he sees is history now. We all know the Babylonian kingdom. We've all read about it. But that's not the end of the dream. He goes on to say, verse 39 now, "And after these shall arise another" what? What does it say? Another kingdom. Okay, so far, we know that the gold represented the kingdom of Babylon. Now we go to the next verse, and here again we let the Bible speak for itself. The Bible is interpreting itself, and now we know that the head representing Babylon is now, according to this verse, is going to be overthrown by an inferior kingdom. Just like gold is much more costly than silver, here is an inferior kingdom that's going to come, and it's going to end your kingdom. The kingdom of Babylon will go away. And it's going to come and arise. And here's what's interesting about this. This actually takes place in the book of Daniel. Many years later. Now Daniel is somewhere close to 80, 90 years old when Nebuchadnezzar's grandson Belteshazzar is celebrating, and they're eating and drinking and they're partying. They're actually using some of the very utensils from Jerusalem and from the temple. And they're drinking and they're partying, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes a hand and writes on the wall. We read this now in Daniel chapter 5. "Then they brought the golden vessels which were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which were at Jerusalem. The king and his princes, his wives, his concubines drank in them. They drank wine. They praised the gods of gold and silver and brass and iron, of wood and stone. And in the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace." By the way, when our soldiers went there, they actually found the remains of the king's palace that Saddam had begun to rebuild over top of the original foundational stones. And you can go online and see the pictures of it taken by our soldiers. And it says in the wall of the king's palace, "And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another." You ever seen people show their knees going like that? But the part that's so funny here, it says the joints of his loins were loosed. You know what that is? That's a real funny way, a real mild way of saying he turned into a party pooper. Okay? The guy went in his pants. That's what it says. This literally scared him so that he messed his pants. That's what it says. So scared. He's going like this. His knees are shaking. Wouldn't yours if all of a sudden a hand shows up and starts writing something? And of course what it wrote, nobody knew what it said. And they're going around saying, somebody tell me what it says. I don't know what it says. What either? I have no idea. All of a sudden, Nebuchadnezzar's, one of the wise stood and said, you know what, Belshazzar, there's a guy in your kingdom. You don't want to talk to him. You don't have time for him. But he's a godly man. And this man can tell you what that says. Isn't it funny, brother? When the world gets in a serious condition, they know who to turn to. And they know who's got the answer. You know what? I want to be in that position. I want to be ready when the time would come that the world has to say, can you give us some guidance? I want to be Johnny on the spot. How about you? So they called for him. They said, you know what? We'll put a gold necklace around you. We'll give you all kinds of stuff. If you just tell us, you know what? Belshazzar, I don't want any of the stuff you want to give me. I'm not interested in that because I got some bad news for you, buddy. Those little writings you see up there, I'm going to give you an interpretation. By the way, have you ever noticed sometimes somebody give a message in tongues and it'll be like a sentence or two, and then the interpretation will be like a paragraph or two? Okay, well, this is a classic example. This happened. It's called the interpretation. It's not a translation, it's an interpretation. And he said, I'll give you an interpretation. Those words you see up on that wall, the first word there, meaning, you know what that is? God has numbered your kingdom, and he's finished it. The next word there is the word tekel, and it means that you're weighed in the balance, and you're found wanting. You're lacking. And then the next word he says, this Perez, it means thy kingdom is divided and is given to the Medes and the Persians. And sure enough, folks, here's an example of how much history the Lord writes when he prophesies, because I'm going to show you how that was talked about 150 years before it actually happened from another prophet. It was Isaiah. Isaiah, who was even older than Jeremiah, says in chapter 45, thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loosen the loins of the kings, and open before him the two levied gates, and the gates shall not be shut. Verse 4 says, and for Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect, what's this? I have even called thee by thy name. Did you remember what his name? It says his name was a minute ago? Cyrus. Verse 1 there said Cyrus. See, it says the anointed of Cyrus. All right, that's written. That's 150 years before the dude is born. Cyrus went as the Medes and the Persians. And you know what the prophecy said? It has something to do with the gates being opened. Did you know what happened, folks? And by the way, what is today? Did you know what this happened? This is crazy. When I was putting this together, this happened on October the 13th, 539 BC. I didn't even realize that until I got, as I was putting this together, that this is today, back then, is when this happened. And this is the day, and here's what happened. They were in their party, and they said, hey, we don't have nothing to worry about. Man, we're so secure, they ain't ever going to get us. And they just partied, and they were drunk. And you know what happened? The people we talked about last night, the Iranians, they got in there, and they dried up the Euphrates River. While they were in there partying, and that evening, one of those guys got in, and they opened up the gate, and when they opened the gate, those soldiers went in, and that night, and of course this is what it says in Daniel 5:30, and that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. Now, we're still in the prophecy, we're still in the dream. He's telling him what has not yet happened. Now we look back and we see it's happened. Now how many know God's outside the time domain?